It is perfect for trade. But these don't really exist on the coast of Africa. The continent, get this, has 20% of all the land on the planet, but because the coast is so smooth, very few indentations, it has less than 5% of the world's coastline. Europe has 7% of the land, 16% of the coastline. But to make things more difficult, the smoothness doesn't do much to slow or break up the energy of the open ocean like a jagged coast does. It slams into the continent, creating one of the most powerful ocean currents in the world very close to shore, currents that sweep up the sediment West Africa's two rivers bring to the ocean and spread it out into any indentation where it can fit, like the few natural harbors Africa does have, which makes the task of keeping African ports open, deep enough for large ships, free from sandbars and shoals that are constantly forming, drifting, reforming, dredging it all away is a Sisyphean task that wasn't possible to do before sophisticated machinery. Africa never stood a chance to be one of the premier continents for trade once the oceans became the way goods are moved around the world. Russia sits in the middle of two crushing geographic puzzles. The first is what we're seeing in Ukraine. This area of land is so flat that it keeps Russia's generals up at night. Not once, but twice over the last 200 years, a European army has marched right up to Moscow. Napoleon captured it. But even if Russia did control that whole run of land, it still lacks the thing any true superpower must have: multiple deep warm water ports that are attached to its mainland. To get to the Atlantic, Russia either has to use its one port in the north of the country, go through the choke point of the Baltic and through the Danish Straits, or down through Turkey, through the Mediterranean, and out into the Atlantic. This is why Russia absolutely loves the idea of the polar ice caps melting a little bit further. If the north coast of Russia can stay warm enough year-round, its north coast becomes a bastion of deep water ports the length of its north coastline, which is very long. Russia's meddling in the Middle East is in part to gain permanent access to a warm water port. They had their eye on the same port in Pakistan that China is currently trying to link to when they invaded Afghanistan in the 1970s. Very cozy with Syria on the western shore of the Mediterranean. Now maybe Putin loves the Syrians, but more likely because the Assad regime had been for decades granting Russia complete and total access to their one major port, a wonderfully strategic spot right above the Suez Canal. Russia's ships are allowed to come and go as they please. And yes, England, the textbook case of how technology can change everything. One of the reasons it was a world superpower for so long was because it's an island, 360-degree access to the ocean. It had a natural gap between constantly warring Europe and easy access to the flow of world trade. But this was the day Britain's fate was sealed.
And here's the giant air armada Hitler hurls at England.
Planes. Flight changed the math from hours to slowly creep across the English Channel and invade by boat to 30 minutes for hundreds of bombers to be over downtown London. That made Britain susceptible, once again, to be invaded by, I'll only say it one more time, constantly warring Europe. From that point forward, the security of the U.S., surrounded by its two oceans, made keeping money in U.S. dollars instead of the British pound obviously a safer bet. The reserve currency switched, causing money to flow out of Britain and into the U.S. There were other things leading up to Britain's fall, but the arrival of the Air Force was the decisive nail in the coffin. Napoleon was right. On a scale of 1 to 10, only one country today ranks a 10 for the three most important questions. Can you feed your people? Can you be invaded? Can you trade? Everything else builds on that. Politics, the economy, culture, it all must sprout from the land upon which it sits. That does not mean it's the only or single determining factor, not at all. But it is the point to start from. So when we ask, is America in decline? The first mention of American decline that I could find was back in 1930. Yet here we are almost 100 years later, because the idea that the U.S. is going to spontaneously collapse ignores the thing that's guided human civilization since the beginning of time. Until something about the land underneath a nation changes, that country's position of power in the world is unlikely to change. Organic food keeps growing, but less than 1% of U.S. farmland is certified organic. That's where Farmland LP, the sponsor of today's episode, comes in. Since 2009, they've been buying conventional farmland in California and the Pacific Northwest and transforming it with organic and regenerative farming practices, crop rotations, cover crops, restoring habitat, farming the way it should be. So after the successful launch of two prior funds, they're now raising capital for their third, giving accredited investors the chance to add farmland, a real asset that produces food, restores ecosystems, and builds long-term value to their portfolio. Check out the link in the description to